Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 5th Data Science Festival. It's a great pleasure to have everyone back in person, and I'm sure that the sessions this year will be as good as they were during the unusual circumstances of the last one, and indeed all the preceding DSFs. Just to remind you that we're recording all the sessions today, and please keep your phones on silent. It's a great pleasure to see as many people here as possible and as a mixed background as possible. The whole idea of the DSF is to try and bring a collaboration and a community together around data science. The event's free, and that's thanks to the help of our sponsors. That's Data Idols, who are the organisers, Meta, aka Facebook, Digitas, LV, Deliveroo, Databricks, GSK Consumer Healthcare, Product Madness, M&S, OpenCredo, King, CFC, ASOS, and of course CodeNode, who are providing the building and the technical support today. There will be sessions outside across all the rooms in the building, and we've got lots of our sponsors here that you can go and talk to and see what they're doing today. But let's move on to the talks. So our first session is from Magda Woods, who talks about robots everywhere, the role of data science and automation in the creative industries. Magda's the co-founder and chief data scientist at AI startup called Waive. She's previously worked in media, in major scale newsrooms for the BBC, The Telegraph, Channel 4, and latterly The New Statesman. And she's an ambassador for women in data science and was in the top 20 women in data in 2018. So over to Magda.
Thank you. Thanks, Charlie. Everybody awake? Very good. Yeah, as Charlie said, this is so good to be actually in the room with people and see people. It's really really nice. So hopefully this is not going to go on for too long, and I'm not going to send you back to sleep. There's coffee outside if you need some kind of a boost as well. My talk is about robots. It's about trying to make a case that automation, even in industry that maybe is not naturally known for automating or efficiencies or productivity, it's more known for creative people. But even in the industry like that, there is quite a lot of opportunity for automation and kind of making sure opportunities to use data science, machine learning, and AI to grow scale, to reduce risks of taking decisions, and as well kind of refocusing humans on what they are good at rather than wasting their time on something that maybe is not as valuable. So before I start, I'm going to be quoting and referring to quite a lot of papers and sources. I'm very bad putting references on the slides, so I created this document with like a reading list. It's not kind of a very well or academically described, but I hope it's going to give you like a nice reading list for after the talk as well. So I think, my introduction was already made, but there's kind of like few points. So one, most of my career I spent in media. So even though my education, my background is quite technical, and I did computer science and did research on neural networks and spent most of the time educating myself as an engineer, I worked a lot with people who are creative, people who are journalists or content creators and so on. Which has its challenges, but also a lot of joy. The other organizations I want to mention that I'm associated with is the Royal Statistical Society. So RSS is kind of a really good place to go and look for information and just knowledge and just understanding of the governance side of data science. As you know, we are quite a new industry, new domain, new profession, and I think it's important that people in the government, for example, who are setting the strategy for national AI strategy or roadmap for AI, that they actually take into account the experts that are associated within the that society as well, and effectively kind of experts in the industry of data science. So check it out, because there's like loads of events and places as well to go for interesting stuff. So I'm gonna just kind of jump straight into this. The media industry. So we're talking about publishers, we're talking about broadcasters, newspapers, any content, any place where you go and consume content. You watch, you listen, you read, get your news from. The industry that has been quite disrupted, as you can probably imagine. I mean, we kind of moved over the last, 20 years from printing newspapers to kind of explosion of online and so on. And it is a very old industry and not known for quick adjustments or quick changes. So lots of challenges within the industry, not so much, I'm just seeing friendly faces, so I'm just waving to people randomly. So it's an industry that is probably underfunded and still finding a lot of challenges in terms of surviving and making money. From my experience, data has become one of the ways that the industry recognized as a potential or opportunity to really turn around. And I think there are 3 ways to really extract value from data within that industry. So one is sell it. Just get the data from your users or somewhere else and just sell it directly. Usually it happens in the form of advertising. So basically what happens with advertising, if you go to Telegraph or to Channel 4, you are probably leaving traces of information, either directly, so you tell them who you are, or you leave traces of data points through consumptions. Through consumption of the content. And that can be used to then give it to or sell it to advertisers so they can target you and people like you with their ads. And that's how the kind of online advertising works in a nutshell. The second area that the data can support publishers and media platforms is through improving customer experience. And predominantly, a lot of the activity that went into this is making sure that you stay longer on the website and consume more content. So all the recommendation engine technologies, all the kind of a UX and UI that's related to this to keep you longer on the site and consume more content, this is one of the key areas of growth and development within the media platforms. And then the third one that I am quite passionate about, and this is what I'm trying to make a case for, but it's probably the one that is maybe overlooked or not yet kind of deployed or used as much, is really focusing on reducing the cost and making the operation more efficient. There was this thing at the BBC where every problem BBC had, they just hired more journalists. But there is a limitation to this because you just can't afford it. So really thinking about how can we use data and the technologies related to it to make sure that we can make the production better and more efficient. So the focus is really today and over last whatever years, the focus was on advertising and that kind of a customer or audience experience. And we've done quite well. So advertising has exploded, obviously everything growing. The market for digital ads has increased. Advertisers started to move from the kind of a paper ads, billboards, and all that stuff to online. So that's something that obviously benefited the media platforms as well. However, on the other side, you can see that the market is dominated, and we know it, everybody talks about it, right? We have Google and Facebook who own over probably nearly 60% of the market, and then the other 3 companies like Amazon and Alibaba own additional 30%. So that leaves for media organizations like kind of the Telegraphs, the Channel 4s, and others, quite a small slice to fight for. Not to mention even smaller publishers that don't really have enough scale to get in there. So there is challenges with advertising, but from the data perspective, we've done a reasonably good job in terms of enabling media platforms to make money of ads. The other thing is the recommenders. One of my favorite topics. I spent a lot of time building recommendations. That kind of a BBC snapshot, that's one of our first tests when we deployed Recommender World Service pages, so multi-language and so on. But you could see, even in kind of like small A/B tests, you could see straight away the impact. People click more. If you put in front of them content that they consider relevant, they're gonna stay longer on the site. And Netflix talk a lot about this. We probably all experience this. They kind of claim that 80% of their streaming hours is actually driven through that personalization effect of recommenders. However, even though we had successes with using data and machine learning or other techniques to keep people longer on the site and sell their data, it didn't come without challenges. And even though people can make money and journalism can survive, we're still ending up in quite a lot of scandals. So the Cambridge Analytica files that came out a few years ago, I'm sure you guys remember, it's not even the problem with Cambridge Analytica that they were a company who really knew how to use social media to help and support either presidential candidates or Brexit campaigns or commercial clients. But the problem was that they stole data, and that was the key issue there. And I think that kind of drove us to realization that actually there is quite a lot of challenges around using people's data, kind of the whole consent, the regulation, whether it's GDPR or whether it's the market regulations. It's really important as a part of it. So it's possible. There is an opportunity for media organizations to make money of the data, but there is a lot of challenges. The other question as well is, which is I think popping up a bit more now, is this even working? And who actually understands how it works? The whole kind of a value chain from publisher to ad server to the user and so on is just so complicated that there is a lot of research now coming up saying actually it doesn't work, and we just lying with effectiveness, lying with what data we use, what is real, what is not real, and so on. So there is a lot of challenges that start to come up with this model and with activities and initiatives and projects that aim to improve the advertising space. Similarly with the recommenders, right? So yes, we did very well. Everybody is binging on Netflix. It's fine. However, it doesn't come without consequences. And only over the last few years, we start to realize that it can have a quite harmful effect on people who are coming to those sites. At places like BBC, we had a privilege and kind of honor nearly to be able to focus on that problem and really ask ourselves questions like what kind of a diversity of the content a user is consuming. And that's the kind of the outcome of that research was that like it is quite narrow usually, and we need to put work into our recommendation system and the way we optimize it, so that we kind of expand the horizon of our audience. But not all the organizations, especially if they're commercial, can really think like this because they can't afford or they just don't want to. So the other learning from kind of doing recommenders and really trying to keep people longer on media sites is that you need content to do this. So in order to really keep people longer on the website, to kind of get people to read more New Statesman or Telegraph, you need to have the right content for everybody to be able to do that. YouTube has completely nailed it, because YouTube basically has the whole internet, like everything is on YouTube. And also they have a very good recommenders, very good personalization approach, really, really optimized. So when you go to YouTube and look for anything, for any possible topic, it's there. And then there is billions and billions and billions of other videos that are of similar topic or in the area that YouTube thinks that is related to what you're looking for. And that's a great model, but they have the content. They have the whole internet of the content. Not without problems as well. There's lots of research, again, and conversation that we kind of participate as an industry, is that it does have that harmful effect as well. And the amplification of, for example, extremist content, going into your bubble of kind of completely weird stuff, even if you start off with something quite innocent, is quite well known. So not without problems, but from the objective perspective of keeping people engaged, YouTube has done quite a lot, because it has all the content. Okay, I have a bit of a kind of a wake-up quiz now. So there's 4 pieces of content. This is BBC content. I always love finding those gems on BBC, quite random. Can somebody guess what is the topic for those pieces? What's the tag behind this? So just to read it out. So there is a piece about US government listing fictional nation Wakanda as their trade partner. There is some parrot that swears that was removed from wildlife park view. There is also some dude that is using his whatever motorcycle to visit all the places in the UK that have rude names. They list those places as well. And then there is a dude who stuck in a swing and had to be rescued by firefighters. The topic tag is stupidity. And what I really can't believe, the BBC has only 4 pieces about stupidity, because that is impossible. There is much more cases like that. There's a question whether journalists at the BBC should be focusing on looking for stories about stupidity. But if they had, and there was more of that content, that's a great binging stuff here. But they don't. And that is the challenge for the recommenders and for keeping people longer on the site. There is another problem with content, with kind of having a range of content, is that no matter what you do, the distribution of the audience popularity measured through things like page views or unique users or some other more sophisticated measurement of the audience of the success, is that distribution is Pareto. So it means that there is few pieces, articles, videos, movies, films that make a really, really big impact. So they're huge. They basically generate more of the most of the audience. And then there is loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of pieces of content that are quite average or very, very small. They just don't get to be read or listened to or viewed by the audience. So what we tend to do in kind of media organizations is we try to bucket and segment the content by different types to understand how to kind of fix it as a problem, how to make sure that we allocate our effort to the right places so we kind of make the right impact. So there is usually kind of four types. The one at the top left is that those are the big blockbuster pieces. So those are the kind of the headlines, the big investments where we spend a lot of time and a lot of resources researching Panama Papers and then releasing a series of articles. There's the stuff that's on the cover of the magazine, and there are the big shows. So those are the blockbusters. We know we spend a lot of money on them, but they're making an impact. And then all the other clusters, all the other segments, whether they have high effort and low audience, or they have high audience and low effort, they kind of average. So there is a lot of them, but they kind of an average kind of a quality to the audience as measured through page views. So what is natural for the kind of execs and people who make decisions in the publishing or media places is that they want more blockbusters. So as somebody who is running a data team within BBC or New Statesman, what I'm ending up with is execs coming up and saying, more of this. What data can do to do more of this? And then the next thing they see is stuff like this. So they see, oh my God, this AI thing is actually gonna solve it. It's doing it. We can use AI to produce blockbusters. So you, Magda, and your team of talented data scientists that we spend all this investment on, you guys better figure it out and get on with it. One note that is interesting about kind of the current conversation about breakthroughs in the language area is that language was always a thing for AI. The whole Turing test was set up in kind of having in mind natural language and how people talk as that core thing to be replaced by a robot or a machine. And any advancement in AI was very much focused about language. So it's nothing new from that perspective. And you can see this if you kind of look back. If you look back, I mean, this is not even the beginning. The 1997 paper, that's actually one of the most, for me, from kind of my education and work in the industry, that's the paper that quite transformed my thinking about natural language processing and generation as well. But kind of if we move to 2020, the most recent developments like the generative pre-trained models, the GPT-3 and any other GPT models that started to be more accessible and developed over the last few years, that is based on all that research that happened years and years ago. In 2008, so somewhere kind of early 2010s, we had tools that started to be accessible. I don't know whether anybody has a chance to use things like Natural O or Gate, which was quite a nightmare to set up and didn't really do anything, and your computer couldn't process it, right? Yeah, like it was just kind of like, yeah, fine, cool experiment, but didn't really do anything useful. And then 2014, again, coming back to that Turing test, this is where we passed it. There was a Ukrainian research that did it. And then kind of when Google and the cloud, well, Google, the money, and the cloud came to the industry, this is where we started to speed up. And this is why GPT-3 at the moment is such a big deal. So just for anybody who maybe that's not the area of interest, GPT-3 is the model that is the most recent when it comes to the language generation. It's been developed by a company called OpenAI, which is funded, and there is a lot of researchers that come from Google and from other places. They got quite a lot of money for people like Peter Thiel, Tesla, and other places, and they really kind of are focusing on pushing the boundaries. In, I think it was June 2020, when OpenAI actually released the GPT-3 model as an open source, so people could start using it and testing it. And hence, all the articles and all the hype in Harvard Business Reviews and other places that talk about this. And your bosses picking it up very rapidly. So how does it work? I'm sure, and I think because it was lockdown as well, I don't know how about you, but I was like absolutely binging on Twitter and looking at all the stuff that people were doing with this. But there is kind of three main areas that this had applications and was some kind of like proof of concept or little applications started to come up. So one is creating text. So there is an input that is kind of a quite structured input into the model, and then the output is text. It's kind of a nicely written paragraphs of text. The other thing is search. So because the models are trained basically on the whole internet, you can ask anything, and that was one of the applications developed on the back of this, and it was really cool, and I think people enjoyed playing with it up until it started to make some really weird comments about things like Holocaust, for example. Saying that, well, if we all agree that it is better for the world to have less people, maybe Holocaust wasn't such a bad idea. So up until that point, we were all pretty much excited, but then realized, maybe not quite there yet. And then the third area, which was tested and used and played with, was the code generation. So how can we use natural language and then the machine kind of generates some simple, in this case, code in the back of that. So that was fun. There's lots of that, some kind of a more fun, some less fun examples. But then at some stage, the CEO of OpenAI came up and said, listen, guys, this isn't ready yet. We're not yet in the space in which we can really deploy it in any kind of a reliable way. And therefore, don't do it. It's just too early. We are in a research stage and experimentation stage. In fact, he said that probably 50% of times that the model gives you some answers, it's just completely made up. So that doesn't quite give us much confidence around using it. However, he now said there is a GPT-4 on the way. I think it actually was supposed to, I think it was announced in September. That's going to be trained on even bigger samples and with more parameters. So this is obviously a space which we have to watch and see what's going to happen. It is going to happen, but my point is that it hasn't happened yet. It's just going to happen, and it's something that we need to watch out for. And I think there is few points around, or that I use to explain to my bosses and to my teams as well, of why we're not quite there yet in terms of using this in the publishing domain. We're not going to be going back to journalists and suddenly telling them, hey, thanks very much, it's been fun, but now I have a robot to do it. It's not quite like that yet. And there's a few reasons. I'm probably not going to go through all of this, but mainly the way the readiness of the foundations of the technical and kind of a model-based foundations in most of the publishers are not ready to be used in the context of models, of kind of a generative models like GPT, kind of a family. We don't yet have cloud kind of adopted in a broader way. Of course, we migrated websites to AWS and GCP, but are we really in the kind of this industry yet kind of live in the cloud in a way that it's required to set up models like that? Probably not. The other thing is that we don't have any money. So media is just very, very poor. And those things cost a lot of money. I mean, it's a bit flippant of me to put that it costs $50 million to train the model. You don't need to train it from scratch, but that just shows the scale of how expensive those things are, and we just can't afford it. So I think that kind of like comes back to this framework, or this segmentation now. We kind of need to stop thinking about the top and thinking that we can, automate it or replace the content creators in doing this. We need to play a bit more of a Moneyball in this. I don't know whether you guys read Moneyball. This is like all kind of old news, but I love it, and I think that's how we should be thinking about this. It's not about kind of getting this best striker who's like gonna just absolutely be a superstar. It's about getting the whole team, the average of the whole team up, and just getting more people who are good enough that as a team, they're just gonna have a better result. So it's similar here. It's like, how do we make better, more optimized decisions within this average space? And we developed kind of two main strategies. One is to take the right top, which is high audience. So those are the pieces that are quite popular and they don't get that much effort. This is great because they are popular and don't require much effort. So I just need more of those. So how can we take the pieces from the high effort and low audience and make better decisions, better commissioning decisions, so decisions about which topic, story, idea to invest in and decide to produce it. How can we make those decisions better to reduce the bottom and move it to the top? So that's one. Support better commissioning, and then the second strategy is take the low effort, low impact stuff that kind of is nice to have as well, because even if something doesn't cost you much, even if it gives you relatively small return, but there is a positive impact, you kind of want to keep it. So why don't we automate it? This is all the stuff that you wouldn't want an intern to do, like waste of their time. And that's why we hire interns to waste, so we don't waste the time. But like anything like that, you want to automate. BBC Three, when we worked with them on commissioning, BBC Three commissions big shows, big series, big things. So it's expensive to do anything. When they were doing normal people, like that's a big decision, and they don't have that much budget. So what they wanted to do is, not necessarily focusing on blockbusters. They don't want blockbusters to be produced by AI, but they say, can we do something to make the commissioning less risky? And you can. And I think this is no news. There are ways of understanding what's going to be relevant to people, what people want from the content creators, and therefore give better result, better impact. So one of the ways to do it is to understand what people search for. So SEO optimization, again, this is nothing new. Everybody uses, whether in media or outside. It's just a good source of data and information, because if people search for it, therefore they probably are interested in this. The problem with SEO is that in order to scale it within the publishing organization is quite hard, because you need a lot of people who go look at the data, interpret the data, report the data, and then come back with the data to journalists. So what we've done, we looked at that process where there is it only gonna work if you really scale it, and we automated it. Nothing to do with very sophisticated AI. It's a scripting process, or kind of a scripting robot that basically replaced people pulling data and shipping data from place to place, from place to place. And that has actually been quite transformational on 2 levels: scale, and then the people the SEO teams started to write code. And that in itself leveled up the organization quite significantly. The other thing is, so that's the search. The other good source for information about what people are talking about or what people want to read or listen about or just are interested in is social media. And this is where the trend extraction comes in. So how can we take all the data, all the talk, all the information from social media and try to extract what are the trends and which of those trends is gonna grow. The problem with this, if you were to do it kind of barehanded, if the editorial, the journalist would need to do it, there is just a lot to consume. So it's all about narrowing down the scope in their choice of the trends. So it's not necessarily to make it perfect, but it's about giving them something that is more likely to work than a guess. And in this case, if we start doing predictions, extracting trends, and then predicting whether they grow or not, we can make the guess 10 times less risky, and that's a good enough input. So that's on this kind of like, how do we de-risk the commissioning? How do we make the decisions a bit more secure? The other thing is about automating the kind of like the no effort bits. So first step is to understand which are the low impact, low effort bits. And once you identify them and then look for patterns, what we realized at the New Statesman is that a lot of those pieces are pretty factual, data-heavy pieces that talk about this company bought this company, and this company started this project, and so on, as well as things like this company is based here, or it's based here, or has population like this. And you kind of start realizing this is quite very pattern heavy. So what we've done is kind of created, her name is Carmen, by the way, it's auto reporter. We created this, again, not a massively sophisticated script, but something that takes one article about something like this company is buying this company, or investing, or facts about a country. And we took one article about a country that's written by a journalist, and then take Carmen, the script, to identify the data points, the patterns, and then replicate it if the data is there. So the machine is not really writing anything, it's just identifying patterns and then replicating it to more data points. And that instead of having a junior data journalist writing 50 pieces about all the countries and browsing through databases, we just automated it. It's not a massive, this is not a blockbuster. I mean, how many times you're going to be looking about, population in Morocco if you want to invest? But it gets enough to keep it going, especially if producing it was so cheap. And this is what we ended up with. So there's lots of pieces for many countries. So that's a wrap, luckily, lucky for you. I think what I was trying to explain here and make a case for is that it's not always about those big breakthrough technologies, but it's about kind of understanding where the data science can make a big impact, and automation, especially in places where you need to scale things, or you need to de-risk things, or you need to get humans to focus on something that is more fun than replicating content. Those are the places where you look for projects and initiatives like that. So that's it. Just looking at Charlie. Thank you.
Thanks, Magda. That's a really interesting talk to start us off today. We've got time for a few questions. If you'd just like to call out, and I'll repeat them. No, just call out, because we're keeping this.
Call out what?
The question.
The question, yeah. So, my question is, is there a risk that we are probably converging to making media content just for the recommender system to pick it and so become popular? Because I look at a very stark contrast, because I like very old content from the 70s, the 80s, but if I talk about, I like those, and people say, no, they are old, and the new Netflix, have you seen it? And I don't find anything, I find it everything the same.
Yeah.
Is that this a risk, or is what the market wants actually?
You want to repeat the question, or I think we heard it. So I think the idea, the core idea behind personalization recommenders is that the benefit of it is that it can understand every need, even if it's niche. So if you are the person who only or is really interested in content from 70s or some sort of kind of vintage art and vintage content, what the recommender is doing is going to be able to recognize that that's the case. The challenge is that the recommender needs that content, and I think the job for data scientists is to understand where the limitations, where are the gaps in the content that feeds into the recommendation machine, and then come back to editorial, to journalists, that we need more content like this. I think that's the whole point. So I don't think we are building something that only going to be recommending the most popular things. I think the idea is that this actually is going to give the opportunity to kind of deliver the content, the niche contents to niche needs as well. Does that answer the question?
Not sure, because I was thinking in the opposite way. So producing content to be recommended, not building it. Of course, well, I agree with what you say, but I feel that the risk is the opposite. So the content producer is not having enough creativity anymore.
I think there's probably a difference between reality and theory. I totally get that. But I think if the system works well, and one of the side effects of the recommenders is identification of niche needs that are not satisfied, and that information gets to content creator, that opens up a lot of kind of other opportunities to content. If the question is whether the content creators have a full control over what they are producing versus only producing the stuff that the audience wants, that's kind of a valid question, but then the question is, why would they produce something that nobody is interested in? Journalists don't want that.
Right. Another question over here.
I'll
read it.
Any trends in translation and translation of journalistic tone of voice?
So that's about trends in translation and journalistic tone of voice.
Yeah, for sure. So for example, BBC has World Service, which has like massive amount of languages, and sometimes languages that are quite niche in a sense, a place like Swahili or Pidgin, or kind of a very, very niche. And the machine translation has a big application in this. Kind of like things are becoming less dependent on the language with this. Kind of vectorizing content, for example, the language becomes irrelevant. It's only kind of like the last step where you need to display to the users, where you kind of display in the language that they understand. So yes, I think there's huge application in translations.
Okay. Another question over here.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to phrase it properly, but all these recommender systems, all these tools that we are trying to build, are mainly driven to increase revenue. Is there any way of looking at it maybe differently, to look at well-being or morality? Because it seems that everything is driven by revenue, and creates a lot of misinformation, and
Yeah.
we have been seeing that more and more. Is there a trend going into well-being or morality?
Okay, so that's recommender systems are driven by cash, basically? Are there ways to target them differently?
Yeah, so I think two things. For commercial organizations, commercial incentive is the critical incentive, and those incentives are built into recommenders, into any other algorithms, right, which translates into bias and so on. So I think the job is for organizations to change and understand incentives in a different way. So rather than think about just kind of that immediate return of more clicks, how people are also coming back. Are there any long-term positive effects of displaying more diverse content? So I think there has to be a shift in thinking for this to happen. And then the second thing, there are organizations that already do it because they have a freedom to do it. BBC is a great example. So at the BBC, our incentive, our cost function within the recommenders, we called it the public service algorithm, which included things like novelty of the content or diversity. So it is possible, but you have to have a space in the organization to raise those issues. And I think actually it's probably our responsibility as people who are in those organizations to raise those issues and to show the value of those.
Okay, thank you for all your questions. We're going to end that talk there. So thanks again to Magda for that really interesting talk.
Thank you. Thank you so much.